Hello, I am Riven Alan. If you've seen my other video, I was sitting down and I'm a lot more comfortable standing up. So this is the best place for me here. I'm used to speaking from a pulpit. Uh, this is my history section behind me. Actually, just my Civil War history section. The Revolutionary War is over there. Ancient and medieval is over there. Political science is that way. And my theology and spirituality section is upstairs. All upstairs. Um, But I am Riven Alan, also known as Pastor Dan or Reverend Daniel, depending on if you know me from the internet or if you know me from my churches and ministry. Today I want to talk to you about good versus evil, and I think we should define that. Daniel Webster from the halls of Congress said, "If you would debate with me, sir, first define your terms." And I think that's especially important today when people are twisting words and twisting meanings to mean things entirely different than the traditional meaning. That makes it difficult to communicate and easy to manipulate people when you do that. So let me start out grounding us all in the definition. When I say good and evil, I am not talking about light and dark, the balance of yin and yang. Light requires shadow, shadow and darkness. They interact together, and it's all part of life. Evil is something different. Evil, I would say, comes from outside. The light and dark is more of a matter of shalom and sin. Let me define those terms because those also are commonly misunderstood. The Hebrew term shalom is usually translated as peace, but peace is a very poor translation of what shalom actually means. Shalom refers to a universal flourishing of all of creation, everything fitting together in harmony, joy, and mutual fulfillment. As you can see looking around, it's something very different than what we have today. But when you say shalom to somebody, you are wishing a world where all things fit together the way they are supposed to, in mutual uplifting, fulfillment, and the joy of life. Converse to that, the yin and yang side of shalom and sin is sin. Sin is described by Cornelius Plantinga as a culpable disturbance of shalom. It's not like most people have this idea that there's a list of things to do and things not to do. But righteousness is actually about doing the right thing at the right time to the right people. And that does not have a set list of you do this, but don't do this, do this, but don't do that. Generally, righteousness is applying your own decision, your own understanding at the right time to the right person in the right place for the right result. That's righteousness in the Hebrew idea. We've oversimplified so many things about our religion. Sin is a culpable disturbance of shalom. It's doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, in the wrong circumstance, and getting the wrong result. St. Paul laments the sin in his own life. He says, "The good that I would do, I do not, and the evil that I would not do, I do." This concept of good and evil in that term is more of a good versus bad. And the good and evil, as we translate it in the Bible into English, sometimes we translate bad as evil. When good and bad relate, like yin and yang, light and dark. But good and evil, as I am talking about it, is something completely different. St. Paul says, as a description of sin, not a list of rules, but he says, "He who knows in his heart what is right to do and does not do it, for him it is sin." I have my double-bladed axe, which represents the union and balance of the male and female, the balance of yin and yang in life. And I think this balance is shown throughout the Bible as a goal, not the way existence is, but the way existence should be. So this balance of male and female, light and dark, that's yin and yang. When I talk about good and evil, I'm not talking about things that are in balance. I'm not even talking about things that should be in balance. I'm talking from something outside that feeds upon good. Good does not need evil to survive, as so many would have us say in today's society. Light needs dark. Good does not need evil. Evil, on the other hand, has no existence on its own. It needs good. It needs life to survive. Evil, as I am using the term, is like a cancer. It's like a disease, and those things cannot survive on their own. Even the most virulent diseases usually have a very small lifespan if taken out of the organism. The virulence, which refers to life, virile, life, comes from the organism it is parasitically attached to and feeding off of. This is the nature of evil. We all experience good and bad things in our lives, but evil, especially if you are an empath or have any empathic ability whatsoever, if you haven't suppressed the sensitivity as our society tells us to, but have left it open since you were young, you can sense evil as something very different, something outside. My experience of evil, the few times I have actually encountered palpable evil, is it is a hungering, devouring, cold, destructive force that feeds on goodness. It warps goodness and then seems to draw nourishment and strength from our suffering, our fear, our lust, and our power. Like a virus and disease needs a body to live, so evil needs good. True evil is not a balance of good and evil. Good and bad, that's the balance. But evil is the hungering, devouring presence that defiles, that corrupts, that devours everything that is good and joyful in life. Now, many people have a bad rap about religion, but religio means to bind us back. In other words, to bind us back to the source of all life, the source of all life that called das Ding an sich by philosophers. Paul Tillich called it the ground of all being. And St. Paul in the Bible says it's that in which we live, move, and have our being. Our very existence is drawn from this divine presence that is panentheistic, not pantheistic, but panentheistic. God in all things, the presence of God in all things, sustaining all things, nourishing all things, and supporting all things. I believe that God is in many ways the source of all life, that life is not mechanistic, as so many would have us believe, but it is organic. And our life comes from connecting with the source of all life. Hey, Persephone. Yeah, say hi to everybody. This is Persephone. This is my son's cat. She is wanting attention. She would like attention from a little boy cat, but we are not giving it to her because we don't want a lot of little kittens. Let go, let go, let go. Go. I'm going to put you down, hon. Bye-bye. All right. Sorry about the interruption, but life is full of interruptions. We need to learn to cope with them and carry on with what God has called us to do without becoming angry, without becoming distracted, but moving on with gentleness and purpose. So, where was I? I was talking about evil needing good to survive. It feeds off of suffering, fear, and doubt. God is the source of all life. It exists in all of us. It gives life to the kitten, and it gives life to us. It gives life to nature, the tree. The Norse had a universal tree called Yggdrasil, and everything revolved around that tree. The Egyptians have this pillar, and the whole world revolves around the pillar and is sustained by it. We have God, which is in all things. St. Paul said to us, "Do you not know that your body is the temple of God, and that God's Spirit dwells within you?" We seem to have forgot this in many ways, that God dwells within us. God dwells within our children. God dwells within our creatures. And God dwells within our enemies. Our enemies are not evil. Our enemies may be bad, or they may be deceived. There's a lot of deception in the world today. Don't hate someone because they have been deceived. Hate them because they're spreading evil. And then hate the actions, not the person. So what's the difference between good and bad? When we try to do good, we can do bad things inadvertently. There's an old saying called, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." And I'm not sure that's true. I think that God knows when our intentions are good, and He doesn't expect us to be omnipotent. He offers us guidance. He may blame us when we don't listen to the guidance that He's offered. I think God is trying to communicate with all of us, and we simply don't listen. There was a book in, I believe it was the 70s or 80s, that said, "God is calling, but most of us leave the phone off the hook." Technology has changed, and or we don't hang up the phone on a hook on the wall anymore. It used to be if you took it off the hook, nobody could call in and you couldn't call out. Nowadays, it would be similar to turning off your cell phone, but even that's not the same, because you can have your cell phone off and people can still call and leave you messages. However, in the old days, if you took your phone off the hook, no one could even call, and no one could leave messages. They had to keep trying until you were willing to put the phone back on the hook, and then it would complete the circuit, and then the technology would work and you could call. So God is calling all of us, but most do leave the phone off the hook. We're so busy, so caught up in our lives that we don't listen. That's not evil. That's bad. And bad and good have a certain balance in life. Joy and suffering. Suffering is not evil. So many of us make the confusion that a tornado comes through and destroys very much. That is a fact of life. It is not evil. There is no will behind it. There is no intelligence behind it trying to feed off of life. It is just a mass of wind and science that moves in a great circle that's very powerful. Nature can be very powerful, but as Darth Vader said to the commanders in the episode 4, "Do not be too pleased with this technological terror you have constructed. It is insignificant to the power of the force. It is the living force that is the ground of all being, the source of all life." And it is that which St. Paul said is in each of us. "Do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit and that God's Spirit dwells in you?" Realize that. Realize that and then act like it. You don't have to act holy. Acting righteous, remember, is doing the right thing at the right time to the right person in the right way for the right result. As St. Paul said, "He who knows what is right to do, but does not do it, for him it is sin." He who knows what is right to do, but does not do it, for him it is sin. That is a powerful definition, because so many of us think that we can stand by and not do anything and it's not our responsibility. But St. Paul makes it clear that if you do not act when you see injustice, if you do not act when you see something bad, if you do not act to help your neighbor, if you don't love your neighbor as yourself, that is sin. Shalom, the universal flourishing of all creation, the interaction of all life in a mutual sustaining and uplifting way, versus sin, Sin is a missing of the mark. We often hear that sin is an archery term, meaning that you missed the mark. In other words, you missed what St. Paul was trying to tell you. You missed that you had something to do. You knew what was right to do in your own heart, but you failed to do it. That is not evil. That's bad. That's sin. That's a failure of shalom. Evil, on the other hand, is a culpable disturbance of shalom. And there are people who thrive on someone else's suffering, who thrive on bringing them down. They have been tainted by evil. The Star Wars would say that they've been tainted by the dark side. There's a reason that a Jedi wore robes of a monastic. This is an alb. It's not a Jedi robe. It's what I wear to preach. The alb is a monk's robe from the Middle Ages. I wear it because it is a simple garment, and it doesn't, what we used to say in the country, is putting on airs. It's simple. It's war. He who knows what is right to do and does not do it, for him it is sin. Sin, evil, beyond sin, is not just simply not doing it. Evil is culpably disturbing shalom, feeding on, destroying on, breaking the bonds of society, breaking the bonds of relationships, and taking joy in it. The Emperor in Star Wars laughed and delighted in the pain and suffering that he caused. When he pitched father and son against each other in the epic, if you've seen that, father and son are fighting together, the Emperor has corrupted the father, Anakin Skywalker, and he's become this evil incarnate figure called Darth Vader. And his son tries to bring him back to the light. And at one point, the Emperor has goaded them into fighting. Actually, he goaded Luke to attempt to kill the Emperor to stop the evil that the Emperor was perpetrating, to attempt to kill the Emperor to save Luke's friends. And Vader protected the Emperor because Vader had become a tool of evil represented by the Emperor. And so father and son fought, one fighting for good, one fighting for evil. And as they fought, the Emperor laughed because he had destroyed that fundamental relationship between father and son, just as he destroyed the goodness in the galaxy when he formed the Empire. Well, I think there is an empire forming today. Maybe not, we don't have an Emperor Palpatine who's behind everything, although there are definitely people who are behind the suffering of today's world. Whether they are good or evil is up to God to decide, not to me. But there are people who are perpetuating suffering. They are perpetuating pain. They're perpetuating death. Some of them are doing it for profit. Some of them are doing it like psychopaths because they get, or a narcissist, they get narcissistic supply, it's called. Now, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't have all of the details of that, and I can't really explain it. But as I understand it, those people get what they need or what they think they need to feed the darkness within them from causing pain to others, from dominating others, from forcing their way upon others. That to me is a culpable disturbance of shalom. And like Darth Vader, for us humans, it comes out of pain and something feeding on our pain and guiding us until we feel that causing suffering in others is actually going to make us feel better. There we become a tool of evil. But I think evil is something different. Evil is something from outside coming into this world. The evil I have experienced, and anyone who is an empath will have experienced it. It feels like a cold hungering, devouring presence. I say anyone would have experienced it. Anyone who is in the presence of evil, you will know. It's very powerful. It's very corrupting. It's very dark. It is hungering, as I said, devouring. It lives off the suffering, fear, lust, and power of other organisms. Whenever it can create dynamics that magnify those things, evil is fed. It's described that there were angels in heaven, and the story is that they rebelled against God, and they were led by Lucifer. And Lucifer was defeated by God, and he was cast out into the outer darkness with much wailing and gnashing of teeth. But that evil wants to get back in. That rebellion wants to get back in, and it wants to feed off of creation. It wants to destroy the good world that God created. It wanted to destroy the life-giving, healing relationships in our lives and turn them to pain, suffering, fear, and destruction. Not death. Death takes us back to the yin and yang, the light and dark, the balance of life. Life and death, joy and suffering are two sides of the same coin. C.S. Lewis once said that he loved his wife so much, and the pain of losing her to cancer was so strong. Um, he wanted to be rid of the pain and suffering. And his wife said, "No, no, you can't be free of the pain and suffering because of the joy that we've had. The suffering is the absence of joy, the absence of the love that we shared. And it is only right for you to grieve that loss. Joy and suffering, yin and yang, go together. It's part of the deal. But evil is not part of the deal. Evil comes from outside. The story tells us that it comes from the outer darkness. It comes to feed upon creation, devouring, cold, hungering, and never satisfied. You've seen people who are never satisfied. They get one thing and then they want something more. And they just want more and more and more and more. That is not evil in itself, but they are tainted by evil. And that endless, devouring hunger that they are tainted with comes from evil feeding on the darkness within each of us. Saints are people who have turned themselves over to light and live every part of their life to bring joy and the presence of God into our lives. Religio, where we get the word religion from, means to bind us back to the source of all life, das Ding an sich, the thing in itself, the living force of Star Wars. Obi-Wan Kenobi said that the force surrounds us and penetrates us and binds the universe together. That is the power of God. That is the power of the living force. That is the power of the divine presence that we talk about here in Of Nature's God. And I invite you to continue with us to learn about these things and to bind yourself back to the source of life, the source of creation, the source of meaning, the ground of all being, Paul Tillich says, the ground of all being, the source of all life. Because only that way can we eliminate the dis-ease in our lives. Only in that way can we find meaning. Only in that way can we truly understand what is right to do. Only in that way can we hear the voice of God calling us. In that way, following the spiritual disciplines and the things we talk about here, you can put the phone back on the hook so that God can call and you can hear him. Saint Benedict called us all to listen with the ears of our heart. Obviously, the heart doesn't have ears, it's metaphorical. Anyone who has had a religious experience with this divine presence, this complete otherness, knows how paltry our language is to try and explain what that's like. That's why so many have gone to song or to poetry and figurative speaking to try and explain what God is. He's not a thing of the mind, he's of the heart. I spend a lot of effort trying to understand and connect the mind and the heart. But truly, we will only ever understand a small fraction of God. We are finite, tiny little beings. And the vastness of God, the vastness of Yggdrasil, the vastness of the divine is something that we will never fully understand. Join me on ofnaturesgod.com, ofnaturesgod.com. And if you like this video, like it, hit the follow button, and push this forward in the algorithm so that other people can see it. God bless you. Peace. Live long and prosper, and may the force be with you. Namaste.